You have a beautiful vintage or old stereo or integrated amplifier. What can you do? Well, there are a bunch of cheap accessories that you can hook up to your old, tired, but wonderful 2-channel stereo system to make it more modern. And today we're going to talk about these products, how you can use them, and how it's going to make your life better. It's going to solve all your problems, and life will be easy now. So sit down, grab a cup of coffee, maybe through your new cheap Audio Man coffee mug that's linked in the description. Let's talk about cheap hi-fi accessories that you can use to modernize your old hi-fi system. Old doesn't mean bad, though. So this is one that's going to kind of be a catch-all. This is the Fozzy Audio ZD3. And what the ZD3 is, it's a DAC, a digital to analog converter. But if you're new in the hobby, this little antenna, I was going to say like the little piggy thing, but that's weird. That's a Bluetooth antenna. Dipping of the toe into the modern hi-fi world oftentimes starts with Bluetooth, which I think stinks, and we'll talk about that later because it doesn't sound very good, but it does have Bluetooth. It also has, right here, an HDMI ARC connection, which means you can take your television, plug it right into here, and then you take these RCA outputs and you plug that into your vintage stereo. Or if somehow, surprisingly, you have balanced connections on your hi-fi, your receiver, your integrated amplifier, whatever it is. Actually, even if it's just a power amplifier, because you can use this as a preamp, a digital preamp. So now you have Bluetooth, so you can use your phone, your iPad, whatever it is, to stream music to the stereo, or your kids can do that too. Editing Randy here, you can also use the remote control to control volume on your vintage receiver if you're using a digital input. Remote control. You can hook up your TV through HDMI, and you also have digital coaxial in, digital optical in right there, and a USB in right there. So if you have an old CD player, and on the back it has a digital output like a coaxial or an optical output, then you can pipe it into here, and chances are if you have a CD player that's 15, 25, 30 years old, 38 years old that still works, it's going to sound better if you use this DAC, because this DAC is better than the DAC that's in your CD player, unless you had a really, really good CD player, which chances are you probably don't. Also, if you don't have a CD player, then you can buy an old DVD player for about $10 with a digital output and use that with your new DAC to get sweet, sweet, lovely CD music into your system for not a lot of money. It's got a 12-volt outboard power supply, which means you can also, later on, if you want to, get a linear power supply to power this thing instead of a cheap wall wart. 150 bucks, you're getting Bluetooth, you're getting HDMI, you're getting a very good DAC. You're getting volume control, so you can use this as a digital preamp to control volume on a straight power amp. You're getting a lot of things for 150 bucks. I would say that's a cheap accessory to modernize your old hi-fi. Now these are really cool. These are spade to banana plug connectors for your speakers. Nothing annoys me more than spending $2,000 or $1,000 on that really cherry vintage receiver that you lusted after when you were a kid, but now you can afford it because you're a Gen Xer and you have money. Or you're a baby boomer and you're replete with cash because all of your kids have gone to college and now it's just you and the wife hanging out in blissful retirement bliss wonderment. Retirement wonderment. Anyway, how are you going to fit even like a 12 gauge speaker cable back there with one of those little tiny screws? But with these, and I think they come in at a whopping $10.99. You slide the spade in there, screw it down, and then you get a pair of banana plugs, which I'll link in the description too. I use Amazon Basics banana plugs. Anyway, you terminate your speaker cable with those banana plugs and then you just slide them in. I had a Macintosh amplifier and there was zero chance that I was getting 12 gauge wire or 10 gauge wire behind that little screw. So I bought these and they worked a treat. And they also make these things for push pin connectors. So it's a pin to a banana plug receiver, like a female receiver. And it's one of the easiest and cheapest ways to upgrade your old hi-fi to be more modern, because it can now accept banana plugs and your life is much easier. If you don't need all that fanciness and you just want to get HDMI into your old stereo for $30, this is such a great little product. For $30, you can get the SMSL PS100. And it's a tiny little DAC. It does not have volume control though. It's powered off of a 5-volt power supply, so something like a cell phone charger. It has HDMI input, it has optical input and coaxial input. It doesn't have Bluetooth or anything like that. But if you have a smart TV and you have Amazon Music, Spotify, or something else like that on the TV, you can simply hook your TV up to that little device. Now you've unlocked all the different apps, and now you can watch TV and movies through your beautiful vintage receiver or whatever other product you have for $30. That's crazy. It doesn't sound that great. It doesn't sound nearly as good as this thing does, but for 30 bucks to be able to get your TV rolling through your vintage receiver, not too shabby. If you want to step it up even further from the Fozzy Audio ZD3, you can get the Weem Ultra. The Weem Ultra is a true preamp. Not only is it a true preamp, but it's a streaming preamp. It has an integrated streamer inside, and you can hook up pretty much any of the music streaming services with the exception of Apple Music. So Spotify, Tidal, has Spotify Connect and Tidal Connect, which makes it super easy because you can just use the app on your phone and then beam directly to that thing. Also has a screen, displays album art. More importantly, it has a 10-band EQ, it has a parametric EQ, it has bass management, which means you can put a high-pass filter on your speakers and a low-pass filter on your subwoofer output, which is another good point because it has a subwoofer output, because most vintage receivers do not have a subwoofer output. So the only way that you'd be able to hook up a subwoofer is with speaker level inputs, which some subwoofers don't have now. What else does it have? Oh yeah, it has room correction, which you can use the microphone on your phone to do a little bit of room correction. That's bananas. Comes in at $330. And they have been running a 10% off coupon on Amazon, at least on my Amazon for a while. Also has an analog input, also has a phono stage, also has optical inputs, so it's also a DAC, has a coaxial input, so it's also a DAC. Also has an optical output and a coaxial output, I believe, which means if you want a better digital to analog converter, you can use that product to output a digital signal. Has volume control over digital signals too. So again, you can hook that thing straight up to a power amplifier and use it for volume control. Also has Bluetooth. So in my opinion, it's the one and done upgrade for your vintage or your old hi-fi system. $330, some people aren't gonna think it's cheap, but it's cheap when you compare it to other products that do the same thing. And actually, not very many other products do the same thing at any price. This next one is a bit controversial. It's a $60 DDC. So digital to digital, but what it does is it takes a USB connection and then it converts that to either an optical, a coaxial, or an I2S connection. Okay, bear with me. The only reason that I recommend this product is because if you have the Weem Ultra, you can USB out of the Weem Ultra into that little product. Not to get too far off in the weeds, but when you're listening to music in the digital domain, there's something called clocking. People are going to argue with me about this one, but it did make a difference. You can take this little $60 box, you can USB out of your Weem Ultra, and then use that digital to go back into a DAC, like maybe this, and you get better clocking. When you get better clocking, you get better instrument separation. And also you get better spatial cues. So the music, the instruments are placed in space more definitively, which makes me enjoy my music even more. And for $60 to basically get a reclocker in that very small situation, that very small use case, I think is totally worth it. And is another cheap accessory that you can use to modernize your old hi-fi. I'm gonna cover all these pretty quickly because one could argue that this isn't really something that modernizes your old hi-fi, but in my opinion, I think it kind of does and it's cables. One of the strategies that I've used, which has greatly improved the rat's nest behind my racks, is buying cables that are the right length. No more, no less. There's some companies that sell different lengths of RCA cables, and I try to keep them as short as possible. Monoprice sells one that's I think only 1.5 feet, and I have used that one quite a bit. They're pretty heavy duty, and they worked for me in the past. I think they're about 10 bucks. If you have vintage receivers, which you probably don't, that have an IEC power connection on the back, generally speaking, vintage stuff has the cable that's already terminated inside the unit itself. But if you don't and you have an IEC connection on the back of your products, then you can buy the perfect length of IEC cables, again, to make sure that you don't have a bunch of extra coiled up cables behind your rack. Cleans it up a lot. These are really cool too. They're 90-degree optical connectors. So if you are running a DAC, if you're running an optical connection between your new Weem Ultra to your new DAC, and you don't want to have, again, a bunch of optical cabling junking up the back of your rack, these are cool. You basically plug one end in and then you plug the optical cable into it, and it rotates 90 degrees, which I thought was really neat. I think I'm going to buy some myself. I also found some balance to RCA cables. If you have a new DAC or a new product that has balanced on the back, and maybe you don't have balanced on your vintage receiver or your vintage amplifier, which most people don't because back in the day it was all RCA. And finally, if you're just crazy on the inside and you want to have a bunch of frustration, but maybe you're a lot smarter than I am, check out the Mini DSP. Basically, you can do whatever you want with the Mini DSP. You take a source, you plug it into the Mini DSP, and then you spit out a processed signal. So you can do things like equalization. You can do things like bass management. You can do all sorts of things. It's way outside of my wheelhouse, though. I personally think that the Weem Ultra is a much better option for most people because it's way more straightforward, way easier to use, and actually I think it's about the same price, if not cheaper, and you get a streamer. So that's what I would do. But you can look at the Mini DSP if you want to. A lot of people love them. If you made it this far in the video, what's wrong with you? If you made it this far, you may find a video I did recently all about high-end audio, and if high-end audio is a scam, if it's basically a conspiracy to gaslight us into thinking we need to buy super expensive products. I will link that right here. Also, if you want to buy a t-shirt, I have these awesome, cheap Audio Man Rocktopus t-shirts, which are running out. There's not too many left in specific sizes. And then you can grab a mug if you want. Those will be linked in the description too. So don't binge watch anything on Netflix or Hulu. Binge listen, maybe through your new Cheap Audio Man coffee mug. Maybe buy some of these cool hi-fi accessories that will modernize your old hi-fi and fill your soul with happiness. And with that, I'm Randy. I'm the Cheap Audio Man.